Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Sweet Combat, Season 1, Episode 17. Great episode, just fun and just a total fun and adorable episode in a lot of capacities. But a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously the squad goes out to celebrate now that Tien is able to stay at the school. Everyone's excited. Even the director crying up a storm saying he had too much water or he's got hay fever. But they go out to celebrate, and it's kind of this nice thing. They're playing games, and obviously for Tien, it's the retrospective of looking back on I never would have thought I got to this point. He even talks about it later on. I ran into all these this school full of crazy girls that's all about fighting, especially the trio he's come to know. But it's he's very thankful for all of it to be, because he went from avoiding all of that to wanting to fight Yi-Chen just for revenge, and now he can use this to propel himself for his goals and what it can mean for his future. Continue thriving at this school and what that means for the opportunities he have in the future to kind of continue look after his brother and sister. So I think that's I thought that was just kind of pretty neat. But obviously everyone goes home, and obviously Zhao Mi gets dropped off at Tian's place, and obviously you can tell it bothers Queen, obviously, but you can tell it also bothers Tien. So she's like, right, I'm going to cook breakfast for the kids so they can have it for tomorrow. And the kids are happy. They're like, oh my god. I even love his sister being like, oh, does that mean you're going to be Tien's girlfriend? And she's like, oh, look at you. Be quiet. Why are you talking about such things you shouldn't be thinking about? But it's like, oh, but what about Queen? I think the brother brought that up. But it's like, oh, she ends up cooking the meals and prepares them and everything. And Tien ends up talking to her. That shocked me that we got this scene, first and foremost, this early. Once again, it's not like a full one-to-one with a lot of the story, where things take place in the confines of the story, because you're moving stuff around, you're adding stuff, you're changing things. So it's not fully comparable to it's not fully comparable to the webtoon and being able to perfectly line stuff up. But this is still fairly early in the story to be doing that Tien wants to talk to her, and she's like, well, we don't have to kind of talk about it. Zhao Mi did not want to talk about it. She didn't want to have this conversation, and Tien doubled down, and he was like, for one, it's I can't keep taking advantage of you. Because she's like, no, it's not like you're taking advantage of me. You're paying me, and this is what I want to do. And he makes it clear to her, it's you've been nothing but kind to me. The fact of the matter is, once again, he brought that up previously, he didn't want to be taking advantage of that. And even saying she's giving him so much more than he could ever pay for, and money can never compensate what she's given him. And ultimately he says I like someone already. And I was like, yo, that shocked me on multiple levels, because once again, this conversation does happen in a webtoon, but it's not a one-to-one. It is slightly altered. I won't get into it too much until the story potentially gets there. But for us to get this conversation, this, or like I said, the tournament and even the tournament's not even over, because they still haven't done the finals. They've only done the preliminaries. But the fact of the matter is, we got this early in the story, and only the preliminaries are over. So that's so fascinating. This conversation does not happen till quite a bit into maybe in the last, I don't know. I keep saying maybe that 60-70% mark is where this conversation potentially happened. Maybe even pushing 75-80%. But it's so wild to have that conversation. This is where you kind of got to give Tien a leg up over Jaegu, because once again, Jaegu had no wherewithal, had no awareness of, until other people pointed it out, until, like I said, later in the series where it became super obvious to him. Because once again, he never took Dao Dao's flirtatiousness as real, because it never crossed his mind anyone would really like him. He's just not used to thinking that way. But for him to get to the point where to have the wherewithal of the moment she kissed him on the cheek, he was like, I gotta clarify this. And I was curious to see what that clarification actually was. I was thinking it was this, but it wasn't for sure. And him laying it down like that, it's once again, despite this character, whether it's Jaegu or whether it's Tian, you're oh, frustrated, why don't you just make things clear? that is extremely clear, and I wasn't expecting that. I mean, even Zhao Mi was like upset by that because she was like, why did he have to be so like crystal clear about it? Like, the fact of the matter is he could have kept it a little open-ended, let me kind of stay in my illusion of what this was. Because for her, it's like, I get it, you might not like me, but it's not going to stop me from liking you. So her and Hao are literally in the same boat of they kind of have to deal with their own heartache, but they're still going to try going after the respective people that they're into. I thought that was, but like I said, that shocked me. Like, oh wow, that once again that Tien was so upfront. Because even once again, Jaegu being upfront does not happen until super late. So for him to have that moment is kind of wild, you know. Considering this is what, episode 17, and we've got like 20 more episodes. So I'm like, how's that going to play out in the grand scheme of things? I mean, once again, Hao and Zhao Mi have not given up, so there's still plenty of room to kind of dabble with that. But that really shocked me. I was like, that's so interesting. So we have that. Speaking of confessions, well, before I even finish that up, I want to talk about Zhao Mi. Poor her. I'm actually like, I'm glad they didn't go the webtoon route with that, because the webtoon route with that storyline, you know, without spoiling it, I won't spoil it. I mean, because once again, who knows if they'll adapt that later on, and I would have to put my foot in my mouth. But the version of like Jaegu being honest with Dao Dao is kind of depressing, the end result of how that all plays out. I mean, there's kind of a happier conclusion to it, but it's also like that moment is like very heartbreaking. You do feel bad for Zhao Mi. Like I said, I don't think this show's like going as dark as the webtoon did in some of like those moments. They kept the levity up of her walking by a couple. I was like, what? You've never seen a beautiful girl heartbroken before? I didn't even love, because like at the same time, Hal is sending her text being like, yo, go, go, go. Like, don't waste this opportunity. And she's like, go die, go die. And so later on, she's with Hal and she's trying to like drown her sorrow. She's like, I'm going to get drunk. And it's like, you can't get drunk off of soda. She's like, it's the atmosphere at the very least. You know, I got to kind of play into the atmosphere, but I also have an image to uphold. So of course, I'm not going to actually get belligerently drunk, but I want to get drunk off the atmosphere with, you know, sodas and stuff. And how is there, you know, and him even saying like, right, if someone as amazing as you can get dumped by someone like Tien, like it just means that I've got to try 10 times harder if I want to make a, you know, make things happen between me and Queen. So it's like, right, we're in this together. Him doing the meow thing, being like, come on, Dao Dao, we're still in this together, and gave her the encouragement because she's like, yeah, if you're going to keep going, I'm going to keep going too. So neither one of them has given up. So there's a little kind of cuteness to that, but you can also see like the writing on the wall of like both of you still focus on the respective person you're after, but this is, I think, going to be a pivotal point where things kind of change. We'll see what the pacing of that ends up being. But in the conversations of confessions and stuff, I forgot what it was that. Oh, I was about to say, I was trying to remember what like instigated Yanan calling Guanyan out, and it was like, oh yeah, right, because him throwing the match, and she's like, what was that about? What was the point of entering the tournament then? And he kind of like, once again, Casanova spits. I love it. I love him doing his thing, and he's just like super upfront of like, yo, I care about you. And it's just like, yeah, winning would be fine and everything, but you're the only thing I want to focus on. You're that important to me. It's like, yeah, I can learn the death fist from the death strike from your dad and stuff like that, but being able to train every day and see you is well worth 1,000 times more than that. I was like, yo, and like Yanan does not know how to react. She's like, what? He even says in English, he's like, oh, you're the apple of my eye, which caught me by surprise. I was like, I could have sworn I remember hearing like Guanyan speaking English in a different episode. It's only for like a tiny bit. I want to say like he was training with maybe Zhao Feng. I think he was doing some kind of training, kind of a sparring training, and he was saying like he was counting in English. So, but I love that like Yanan didn't get it initially because she's like, yeah, like I failed English and I'm actually having to retake it right now. So she didn't understand what he was saying, and just like she was so bashful. It was so adorable. Once again, seeing her who's like so confident, ready to swing first, like she's so confident. And yeah, she get teased by Zhao Mi about stuff, but this is a moment she was just like completely like swept off her feet and almost caught off guard. And I love him screaming after her like, yo, does that mean I get to keep the apple? And stuff like that. Him even kissing the apple. I'm like, dude, look at you being suave. And she doesn't know what to do. She was literally about to walk away without her skateboard, and she had to come back and get it. And she was just so caught off guard. She couldn't sleep at her own home. She tried laying down. She kept tossing and turning for 2 hours. So she went over to Queen's house. And I love that we are literally getting the inverse of a couple episodes ago where Yanan was kind of there for Queen when she was dealing with the stuff with Tien. And now... And even like, it's like, what were you stressing about? And it's like, oh, it's all Guanyan's fault. And Queen is like, oh, he confessed to you? And she's like, wait, how did you know? And it's like, it's super obvious. And even Yanan is like, am I that easy to read? He's like, you both are. To be fair, you're besties. Of course you're going to recognize that in each other. You're going to recognize, like, it might not seem obvious. You're thinking, like, it's not obvious to other people, but, like, the people who know you best, of course it is. Like, they're able to recognize, like, oh, you're really into this person. Even asking, like, so when you looked at that sandbag, did you see Guanyan? And she was like, no, I saw myself. And Queen's like, wow, you got it bad. You've really fallen for him. I was like, I love her teasing her like that, because it's like, yeah, she even says it's karma for all that you kind of put me through. So she's in the bed tossing and turning with Queen, and Queen's like, all right, fine, let's talk about it. And the conversation comes up of like, right, he said that, the thing I couldn't figure out is, why did he say, like, you are the apple of my eye? Like, why is he saying that the apple has my eye? And Queen's just like, oh, you idiot. It means that you're the only thing that he looks at. He doesn't see anyone else but you. And she's like, well, why didn't he say that? Like, you're the coffee mate to my coffee, the almond to my chocolate. Like, what knows have been better examples? It's like, it's an idiom. It's like a very classic old school idiom, So I'm wondering, I mean, I'm sure that's what I'm curious about. I'd assume that's like that's an English, I mean, obviously they're said in English, so it's got to be like an English idiom that probably doesn't translate well into Chinese. But like, because you study like English, you're studying grammar and vocabulary and all that stuff. You're probably studying idioms and stuff like that, So I get it, it's like, right, that's a fancy way of saying it. Like, I mean, obviously Yanan's kind of got like the meathead perspective. She's kind of like all brawn, no brain sometimes in a lot of ways. But it is adorable. There was, like I was saying about the conversation about friends. Oh yeah, because Yanan was like, oh, I guess I finally understand what you were going through with Tien. And now, and Queen's like, yeah, now I also see like the heavy responsibilities of being a best friend. I was like, that's super adorable and cute. I love it. And it's like, oh, you can have these tissues if you can't sleep. And she's pulling them out like the whole thing with like daisies. Does I like him? I don't like him. I like him. I don't like him. It's like, that's so adorable. So we have that. We have, despite everything, Xiaomi, very much kind of in a similar vein as Dao in the webtoon, is trying to pretend like everything's okay. Once again, she's made it clear, I'm not giving up. You might have kind of turned me down, but I haven't given up. So she's presenting a strong front, and she's trying to also give Tien a space, and is like, right, I'm gonna I think it's not, she doesn't actually say it, but I'm sure she's kind of got a similar perspective at how, who's like, I'll just protect you, I'll be behind you, and then eventually maybe said person will turn around and notice me. That's what he had said to his mom, like episode 15. So I'm assuming that Xiaomi has kind of got a similar perspective on it. But yeah, like, she's offering lunch for them, and then like the results come in for the English, and it turns out both Yanan and Xiaomi did horrendous. And it's like, what about Queen? It's like, well, Queen did great because, well, her family being what it is, she's probably learned English before she could even walk, is the conversation. But Tien's like, no, I'll help you guys out. And now they're fighting over him as a study partner, which I love. And what I love the most is Queen got it in her head, like, oh, they're hanging out. Like, there was even that whole thing of like, don't worry, Queen. Yanan was like, I've got your back. I'll make sure Xiaomi doesn't monopolize Tien. So she's like, in fact, we together will monopolize him for our help. And Queen just kind of gives her the glare. She's like, I'm just kidding, but yeah, Tien's waiting. And she's like, Queen mocks her, being like, Tien's waiting. Like, when'd you turn into Xiaomi? But then all of a sudden it clicks in her head, like, hey, if I want to hang around Tien, maybe I pretend like I need help, So she, while doing work, she immediately like starts getting stuff wrong just for the purpose of getting a lower score so that she can hang out with Tien. Even in class, when the teacher's calling up people's names, she's up there daydreaming about, can you explain it to me? I'm not so good at mathematics. He's like, well, what you need me to explain? She's like, everything. And seeing her, so like, the actress who plays Queen is so adorable in those moments, just kind of smiling. Like, she nails that. Like, because you get to see, like I said, Queen, you have, like, she has her adorable moments, especially because, like, you know, you're very, like, anime, manga, or manhwa, like, traditional thing of, like, she blushes. Like, those are, like, a really adorable moments when she gets, like, super bashful and stuff. But it's just, like, it was such a beautiful moment that, like, multiple people had to call her name. And she's like, oh, sorry, I didn't hear you, but I know I did terrible. But the teacher's like, no, you did exceptionally well. I was like, wait, how did that happen? I was like, there's no way, like, you were actively trying to get the wrong answers. And she was confused too, like, how did this happen? And even I was like, are we having a She's Hopeless situation going on here? She's Hopeless is the name of another manhwa webtoon. I highly recommend you check it out. I even made a video talking about it. No spoilers or anything, but it was just a video I made talking about why I love that series. But it's a great, like, if you're looking for something romance and kind of in a comedy, in a very similar vein as this, comedy, drama, romance, then that's a great series to check out. I will forewarn you, there is some dark stuff in that story. It can be pretty, like, dark and depressing at sometimes. Either way. But I was wondering if there was a similar thing going on there. I love the resolution to it is, no, her brother came across her test results and were like, her paper, and he was like, no, I was coming to take something and I saw your answers were wrong, so I corrected all of them. And for her, she was so pissed because she's like, no one asked you to do that, you idiot. Because it's like, you ruined it. Her great plan of, like, making a terrible score so she could use it as an excuse to hang out with Tien is like, you could do the simple thing of just asking him if you can hang out together, but she's too bashful to do that. It's too awkward. She's too awkward to do that. So I mean, I guess you could technically just show up, but the whole point is, like, she doesn't want to show up too obviously. Like, if she just shows up just to show up, it's like, well, I can't really do that. She needed an excuse to be there, but that blew up in her face. I even love, like, she was walking past a class while he was teaching them. It's actually really interesting, the whole, like, larger conversation about English, you know. Because there's, like, I think a lot of Asian languages in general, like, I don't know how it translates from other languages to, like, you know, Japanese, Korean, or Chinese, or Mandarin, or anything like that. But, like, going from, like, English to any Asian language, I always hear is, like, super difficult because there's just like, the language is such a, I'm sure, like, not just speaking wise, not just vocally, but also just written wise. So it's just interesting to kind of get the inverse of that, where it's just like, right, you know, I mean, as an English speaker myself, like, the complicatedness of the English, like, you never really think about it until you're in school and you're having to learn stuff like articles and prepositions and, like, what words, you know, even like TM was explaining, like, oh, like an article would be like the word the. It's like, there's no real meaning to it, but it always comes before a noun. It's like stuff like that. You're like, why would I need to know that? It's like, unless you're going to be a writer, you don't really need to know that. I mean, maybe it probably does affect your life in other means and other manners, but it's just like, it's such an interesting thing about the English language. I mean, every other language has their own, like, sentence structures and vocabulary and just, but I don't, like, it almost sounds like they don't get into the nitty gritty of words the same way that English does. Once again, it's actually a really fascinating conversation. Once again, having been, like, someone who is a native English speaker who knows, I know very little in different languages. I know, like, a few words in different languages, but that's why I'm not going to be like, oh, I know other languages. No, I know one language, and that's English, you know? So that's why I'm not going to pretend like I know any other languages. So that's just, like I said, as a native English speaker, that's such a fascinating thing. So, and especially when he's bringing up stuff like that, I'm like, oh man, I remember being in high school learning that type of stuff in English class. It's like, Jesus, that kind of takes me back. But I love that it's just so much that, like, everyone's passed out. Because Hao doesn't seem to need to really be there, but he's there for moral support for Xiaomi and Yanan. But they're literally falling asleep in class. It's amazing. And then, like, Queen's more frustrated because I think it was a different, like, test or whatever. Like, I don't know if her brother also changed the answers for it or whether it didn't work out and she was frustrated. But she shows up at the car wash. She's like, yeah, you're going to meet with the others and help them out. So I decided I'm going to show up to help out so you'll be able to get to them faster. And so she was able to hang out with Tien in a different way. You know, she found her in without it being too obvious, you know. So I do love later on, there was that whole conversation with, like, Xiaomi was kind of saying, like, why does English have to work the way it does? Because she was like, yeah, you can call me Xiaomi, you can call me Mimi. It's kind of like that thing of, I forgot. I don't remember the exact wording of what she was saying, but it's just kind of like how English works the way it does. Like, why does like one less letter or thing like change something? Why can't why can't this word still be this even with a missing letter? She's kind of even saying like my name, like you go from Xiaomi to Mimi, and it's still like yeah, I'll still respond to it, still recognize it, and then it's like Yanan's like, oh my god, preach! I totally get that. You're so smart and right about that. I love that Tien and eventually Tien and Queen show up, and then obviously I'll keep doing that. Xiaomi is kind of like, wait, why are they showing up together? Hao didn't have that response. He's just kind of like, hey, they must have came in together. But Xiaomi's suspicious and looking at Tien, and Tien's kind of looking bashful in a way, looking like, yeah, things are still in that awkward period between him and Xiaomi. It seems like they're good, but still. Because it's also like, right, you're hanging out with the person you like, so it's just interesting. And I love that like Queen bought a whole bunch of apples and was teasing Yanan about Yanan like runs into the tent and covers herself up, and even Tien's like, is there something special about these apples? It's like, yeah, it's an inside joke. I love it so much. Which, speaking of that inside joke, we catch up with Guanyan as he is getting reprimanded by the president. Like Zhao Feng kind of said it last episode that he probably would most likely suffer some ramifications for it. So basically it's like he brought dishonor to not only the school but also the boxing club by forfeiting. It's like, why would you even be in the competition in the first place? He didn't know he was going to do that when he signed up, but it was kind of a heat of the moment decision. But even he's like, I don't regret what I did. I thought I did something that I thought was an honorable and right thing to do in the moment, but if you have to punish me, so be it. So he's like, all right, you'll step down as captain. He's like, I actually did that before I ended up forfeiting my match. I'd already given Zhao Feng control of the club, because for him it's just like, right, I wanted to minimize the problems I was going to cause. Like, I try to want to not as inconvenience everyone, but he still did. And so now his punishment is like, why don't you just do us a favor and just kind of withdraw from the school then? But he's like, I don't want to give up on the school here. I would suffer whatever reprimand you want. So until the end of the semester, he's going to have to be doing a lot of janitorial custodian duties, and he accepts it. And you can tell, like, I think the president was disappointed in him, but I think there is some level of the grace and wherewithal and honor that Guanyan accepts it, because once again, it's like he did it for his own principles, and yes, to some extent because of Yanan, and just it's for him, it's like whatever ramifications I have to suffer, I do this with a clear conscience. It might not sit well with my fellow students. That was even something he was saying to Yanan, like, I don't care if like people are pissed at me for my decision. I stick by it and I do it again in a heartbeat. Especially, yes, it's a little for Tien and for boxing in general, just because of the way Yichin was handling things, but it was also just for Yanan's sake as well. And to give me Tien an opportunity to fight Yichin, which he shows up and it was kind of a complete another douchebag to Guanyan, but he keeps his composure. Just shows you how much of a good dude he is. But then Zhao Feng is hearing all of this, and I think maybe hearing that was kind of necessary, because for one, it's just the fact is he's willing to kind of take this on the chin just for the purposes of standing by his own principles is honorable. But also maybe for Zhao Feng, it's like, wow, you are that serious about Yanan that you would go this far, and might even kind of lead to her taking even more of her anger out on Yanan, being like, you're the reason why everything fell apart. Everything was great until you got involved. There might be that element to it. I'm surprised we didn't have the whole, it still could come up, but last episode I was so certain that Yanan was going to hear from Zhao Feng about the only reason why he starts liking you is because your dad was going to teach him. But Guanyan kind of approached that, but he didn't make it. It didn't come out from the purpose of, I'm only hanging out with you because I'm trying to learn it. He made it clear in it's two separate things, me liking you and wanting to learn the Death Strike. But Zhao Feng will probably say no, it is one thing. But I don't know. Maybe that's just a personal thing she's going to keep to herself, not necessarily use it against Yanan. Like I said, that was my theory last episode. But him kind of not broaching it to some extent during his confession to her makes me feel like that won't get used against Yanan in the future, but who knows. But I'm hoping that Zhao Feng can kind of hear how Yichin is acting and kind of have better insight into what Guanyan was saying last episode about like honor and stuff, and it's like, right, hearing how Yi Chen is responding, it's like, right, that's kind of a symptom of a larger issue that we kind of have to nip in the bud. So it's going to be interesting to see how Zhao Feng handles this. I'm also curious to see what they do with Yi Chen, because the equivalency, the bully character in the webtoon, after like his fight with Jaegu, he only pops up like a handful of times. He's a super minor character going forward. Like after that, he doesn't really have any plot relevance except for like I said, like literally, I think you can count on one hand maybe the amount of times he pops up afterwards. It's like maybe 5 or 6 times maybe. So that's why I'm like, I'm curious to see if they do more of him in the live action beyond this. Like maybe that ties into Zhao Feng's story, what it's like going forward with the boxing club. Maybe that's where his story, like, so to give him a little more presence in the story. But like I said, like after like him losing to Jaegu and the aftermath of that fight, like you don't really see him except for those handoff, like he's not plot relevant at all anymore. So I'm curious to see how they handle that character. So like I said, just an adorable, fun episode all around. And except for some heartbreaking moments, but I'm very, very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.